and we are back to give you an update about the situation and also asking some of those tough questions about why this is happening today in Darfur. Um, our presentation today is about the escalated violence in Darfur and across Sudan, and why specifically this is allowed to continue, and who should take responsibility and what needs to be done. As you know, the people of Darfur have been going through this crisis for the last 18 years. Unfortunately, there has been change in the government. Um, a few handful individuals were removed from power, but unfortunately, many more are still around, and that's why. So, starting in the beginning of this year, there was a huge attack in Al Junaina that killed so many people, torched about 100 homes, and displaced thousands of people who have been driven out of their homes. We all were outrageous and we came out, but we were thinking now that we have the interim government in place, these attacks may not be allowed to be repeated. Then the attacks go on and on. Attack in West Darfur, in Zalingi, then attacks in far southern Darfur around Greda, Toulouse. Then there are again attacks back in western Jabal Mara, in southern part of Jabal Mara, in eastern part of Jabal Mara. Then again, the attack start escalating and spreading across Darfur to different areas and different cities. And these attacks are not just this is the first time, but this is attack specifically directed toward a group of people who have been selected and subjected systematically to be attacked. Then again, the recent in June and July attack in Yertete, including the rape of minors and attack on civilians by the forces, government forces. It's not the militias that are unknown. It's not that random people. It is people in uniform that are known to the government and known to everybody in the city of Nyertete who have attacked the people. People organized this sit-in and demanded an answer. Also, they set a specific demand that needs to be addressed. Their sit-in was very prominent, and we were very proud of that they were able to force the interim government to send a delegate to Nyertete to meet with people. Guess what? We were hoping that what happened in Nyertete, but when the government come and visit and send their delegate, that will be the last one in Darfur. Unfortunately not. Then immediately attack started in Kapkabia, whereby farmers were beaten to death in their farms in the beginning of June, the first week of June. In mid of June through July, other people were attacked. Another 2 people were abducted and shot at by using live ammunition by, they call it, unknown people. When the police was notified, they refused to pursue the attackers. Then again, a group of people were attacked while they were going to their farm. Then again, an individual, young man, went to his farm. A group of people came, 7 Janjaweed leaders attacked him and brutally killed him without no answer, and the police did nothing but stare at people. The citizen in the city, they have to bury their own dead, and they came out and protested, and they organized this sit-in and demanded that their plight being recognized by the government and that this attack should end. Unfortunately, before we finish with the sit-in that was organized in Kapkabia, a sad incident happened in Fatah Berno, whereby people were shot at. People have a dispute over the land, And why all of these attacks are happening? Because there are new people that have been brought by the government of Sudan, the al-Bashir government, to resettle in these people's land. People were taking over their land. When they spoke, they immediately shot at them and ignited the fighting. When people protested in the camp, 9 people were shot dead. Many more were injured, including children. And then the citizens were angry. We don't encourage violence, but in response, they set the security or the police station on fire, and then another fire was set on the Kasab internal displaced camp. So all of these incidents are happening. Again, before we are finishing with like how we can resolve the incident in Fataburno. So we had Nadate, then we had Kapkabia, then we had Fataburno, then again another attack happened in Al Junaina, whereby Janjaweed Rapid Support Force military, who have their leaders in Khartoum, attacked the tribe of Masali systematically. They killed over 68 people. Over 100 people have been wounded, and people were forced out of their homes, and their homes were burned to the ground. And these people were not only attacking people randomly, or they have a dispute over something. They attacked in Al Junaina, similar to what happened in Kapkabia, in Fataburno, in Nertete. It is against the indigenous African people in Darfur. It is against the Masali, and the tribes that were systematically selected from 2001, 2002 up to date to be killed and forced to leave their homes. And in Al Junaina, there was an appeal from Arab tribes calling on their people to gather and wipe out the Masali. There is this woman who recorded a message and saying to people, do not let any Masalit ride a car. Do not let any Masalit hold an office. Do not let any Masalit walk in the street. Do not get up, Hoy Arabs, get up and do this. So this is it's clear that it is a systematic campaign of killing. And now this is happening right now. Why? Because there's like a little bit of space of change that is start taking place, and these people are worried because the ex-government President al-Bashir promised them land and gave them the land of the internally displaced people. They feel if these attacks ended and there is no more attack, these people will feel safe enough to go back to their villages and to go back to their land. So because of that, they are igniting these attacks, and they are trying to scare these people to continue to stay in camps so that they can continue to enjoy and take over this land. Right now, Janjaweed and militias from Arab tribes, and we have to be clear, not all Arab tribes are Janjaweed, but those who are Janjaweed recruited become the Rapid Support Force, and Janjaweed leaders who brought their families from different countries staying in Darfur, taking over the land, the farm, the gardens, the homes, and all the type of properties of the people who are living currently in the camps in Darfur, and forcing these people in this difficult condition for the last 18 years. Unbelievably brutal, and it is clear that this is not only this group of people who are attacking others, but these people, because they are emboldened, because they have their leaders in the government, and the interim government is doing nothing to protect these people. They visited Darfur, they visited Naptete, they visited Kapkabia, they visited Fataburno, and they visited Al Junaina. Guess what? Who visited? The leaders, military leaders, who are part of this group. These are the group that have been recruited, systematically recruited by al-Bashir, but under the leadership of Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, and under the leadership of al-Burhan, who is the current president of Sudan, and the Hemeti, who is the current vice president of Sudan. And that is why these people are so arrogant and sure that they know that because they have their leaders in power, so they don't care. They will continue to attack these people because this land has been promised to them. And they want to continue to kill these people, to wipe them out of their land, or either scare them and force them away from their land so that they can. And what that means, like if you look into the definition of genocide, it's systematic targeting against people, either based on their ethnicity, religious, or political affiliation, enforcing condition, psychological and physical harm on them, and keeping people in one place, like forcing people to live in the internal displaced camp for the life. This is a genocide in itself. And the continued attack. These attacks are not random. It's not going to other people. It is systematically directed toward this specific tribe, those who have been singled out to be killed over the last 20 years. Can you believe that? These people have been under attack for 2 decades. And right now, people in Sudan are still talking about, violence in Darfur. These are tribal problems. These are tribal clashes. There is nothing called tribal clashes. These people are systematically militarized and equipped by the former regime. The former regime, al-Bashir, has been removed. A few handful individuals have been removed, but many more remain as part of the system. Right now, they are taking part in the interim government of Sudan. So you may disagree with me, but the truth is that why don't the interim government stop the attack against these innocent people? Why don't the interim government issue a decision appealing to their people? Why not Al-Burhan and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo issue an appeal and call on their military, asking them to stop attacking people? Because they are complicit. They used to survive in chaos, and they want to continue this. But this is at the expense of our own people, at the expense of the indigenous African people in Darfur. These are the people who are indigenous to Darfur. This is their land that they inherited from their ancestors for years. They have no affiliation. They have no other intercontinental tribal affiliation whereby they can go to another country and they say, well, we have relatives in this other country. They are only existent in Sudan, and they're indigenous to Sudan. And they are under attack. So you cannot justify to me that the interim government is unable to stop this. They are able to stop this because they are the government right now. They have the responsibility, and part of the military leaders of the interim government are the one who created these militias. They created this group, and the Rapid Support Force is fully integrated to the Sudanese army. Right now, they are fully operating as part of the Sudanese army. So the interim government bear primary responsibility of every single attack happening in Darfur today. And we must be able to tell them that they are responsible. Why they are responsible? Because these militias are recruited by these 2 guys who are sitting in the top of the leadership of the interim government of Sudan right now. They know them individually, and they know them by department and by commanders and by sections and by geographical areas. They can communicate with them and they can stop them. As long as they're not communicating to them, they're not stopping them, and they're not stepping up responsibility for empowering citizens to be able to protect themselves, that means they are complicit and they want this situation to continue. And that's why we have to expose them and hold them accountable. You cannot look around and say these are people are attacked by the unknown people. Today, the Sovereign Council and the Prime Minister and his cabinet are fully responsible of all the attack against the people of Darfur in Darfur. Again, the same situation is happening in South Kordofan. And it's happening now, unfortunately, in Eastern Sudan. And who are under attack? These are the people from Nuba Mountain who have been forced to flee their homes due to attack by the same government and the same militias in South Kordofan. Some of them fled to the cave. They are living in the mountains as of today for the last 8 years, for the last 9 years. Most, as those who are unable to go to the mountains, they fled and scattered in different parts of Sudan. Some of them in the suburban of Khartoum, they are living day to day. They have not been recognized as internally displaced. Some of them went to Eastern Sudan and they're living in Port Sudan, Kassala, and other areas. And these are indigenous Sudanese. All Sudanese must be able to live in peace in their country, wherever they choose to be. These people came peacefully. They have not hijacked or taken over any person's land. The hostility between the Nuba groups who are in Port Sudan right now and Banu Amir has been created by former regime. If this is created by the former regime, we understand that when the regime was removed, this supposed to be end, but it is continuing. Why it is continuing? So this is a clear question that we need to ask. To ask this interim government, why attack on innocent civilians who are living in the city of Port Sudan continue to, and we call them tribal clashes, and we, the government, sitting there and watching people dying every day without stepping up responsibility or putting on strong forces to stop the attack and making a permanent solution. To what? Until when these people have to suffer? These are the people who have been displaced the first time from the Nuba mountain. Imagine for what they can do, to what extent they have to suffer, to walk all the way and travel to Port Sudan to get settled. They settled there, they did not settle in nobody's land. They are settling, living on their own, they are working, supporting themselves. These are Sudanese people. Bani Amr are Sudanese, Nuba are indigenous Sudanese from the Nuba mountain. They are free to stay everywhere in Sudan. And now this become every month, it cannot go by without hearing that attack against or fighting ignited between Nuba people and Banu Amr in Eastern Sudan. And you tell me that now we have a government in Sudan. You speak about the interim government. They're going out and printing this rosy, beautiful picture to the international community that there is no insecurity in Sudan, that they're working to improve human rights condition in Sudan, that they need the international community to support them. And recently, as you all may remember, Germany has organized a donor conference to support the interim government of Sudan, assuming that now everything is good in Sudan and they are good to go. Unfortunately, that is not the case. People are still going under attack, and there are so many forms of gross human rights violation against the indigenous African in Sudan. And this needs to be understood and addressed before we can give a pass to the interim government of Sudan. This interim government of Sudan is complicit, fully responsible. And you can say, well, this is a new government, the country is fragile, it has been under crisis. There hasn't been crisis in Port Sudan before. But this government, the former regime, has created, and today, even though Bashir and a few individuals have been removed from power, there are handful individuals and the apparatus and military security and group that are still operating within the Sudan. And why this is happening? Because of lack of accountability. If we can hold Bashir accountable for what they did in Darfur, if we can hold al-Bashir accountable for what they did in the Nuba Mountains, if we can hold them accountable for what they did in Khartoum and everywhere in Sudan, for all the massive and gross human rights violations that they committed, anyone in Sudan will think twice before they can go and commit another crime. But unfortunately, that did not happen. Why al-Bashir is not held accountable? Because has been protected and sheltered by the interim government of Sudan. Today, al-Bashir and many individuals who have been responsible of crimes in Sudan are held and protected and sheltered by the interim government of Sudan. And that is why this kind of violence and attack will not stop easily, because you have the most criminals who have committed the most serious crimes, international crimes, holding them and sheltering them, providing protection for them, and refusing not to surrender them to the International Criminal Court. That is where the problem is right now, because al-Bashir, Abdurrahim Hussein, and Ahmad Harun are wanted. There are many more people who are responsible, like Salah Ghosh, Ali Usman Taher, Nafi, Awad Jas, the former foreign minister, Gandur. All of these people are responsible of these crimes. The interim government of Sudan took them away. If they leave them free, it would have been much better that the ICC can send the Interpol and arrest them and take them to The Hague. And also another arrangement can be made to arrest the other people. But right now, the interim government is sheltering criminals, covering up for them. And it seems like they are playing, and the Sudanese people do not want to tell them in their face that you guys are responsible of this. We need to speak up. Those of you who have fought to bring, who supported the revolution, fought and stood up and organized the sit-in and paid the highest price, you must be able to speak up. Tell the interim government of Sudan that this violence has to stop. And because of this silence, the people of Darfur has to go through the most brutal genocide in the world, because the majority of Sudanese were silent. And today we are seeing the same pattern going again and again. And the remaining, the rest of Sudan is quiet, because today there is no attack in Khartoum, there is no attack in Al Jazeera, there is no attacks in Al Ubaid, there is no attacks in Kosti, there is no attack in Al Butana, and we hope there is not. But if there is no attack there, you should not allow attacks to continue taking place in Darfur, because Darfur is in the Sudan, and Darfur are Sudanese. And if we have a government that is incapable and unwilling to provide protection for its people in one single city or one single neighborhood in Sudan, we should be outrageous, and we should be protesting this and speaking up. And also for this goes for those human rights and advocacy organizations that are focusing on Sudan. Many people have been celebrating that there is change right now in Sudan, and again, the international community is going to commit the same mistake. This was the same situation when al-Bashir came to power. Everyone was racing and running to support the Sudan, and they supported the Sudan. The next thing we found is that the military become emboldened and continue to use the money and support and all kind of support against the people of Sudan and destroying the Sudan. And today I can see the pattern is going to be repeated the same with the interim government. Why? Because the international community is so quick to believe that change in Sudan is taking place because simply an individual is replaced by another individual. This is only change of chairs and change of position. It is not the change of heart, it is not change of system. Sudan needs systematic change, institutional building, reform. And that is why I think as long as these attacks are continuing, we have to call on the interim government to bear the responsibility. And the international community, we have also to call on the international community, and top among them is the United States. Right now, the United States, just 2 weeks ago, Secretary of the State Pompeo, while Darfur was burning, he was talking about now we are ready to delist Sudan from the terrorist sponsoring country. It is unbelievable. This is like, oh, it is home versus us or they versus us. So now that they get the government of Sudan to pay compensation for the American victims who have been killed by the former government of Sudan in a terrorist attack in Kenya and Tanzania, now they don't care about even those that are African victims who have been killed, who were working for these embassies, African nationals. There has not been any compensation for them. But there is no a good reason when a man or a government is still perpetrating terrorism against its own people, and you look and say, okay, as long as they can compensate the American people, we don't care about the people of Sudan who are dying. And that is wrong. That's against the norm, against the values of the United States as a country. And we as American people, we must not sit by and let the Trump administration do so by going forward and lifting sanctions from Sudan, or delisting Sudan's name from the terrorist sponsor country, because that will give them immunity and will allow them sovereign immunity. And sovereign immunity means that these military leaders who are in power and those leaders who previously commit crimes against the people of Sudan, but also commit international terrorism crimes, they will go and punish. And they will, what that means they will continue to be unburdened to terrorize Sudan, to threaten the security and stability of the Sudan as a country, and also threatening the security and stability of the people who have been systematically targeted, but it also threatens the security and stability of the region and the security and stability of the United States. So make no mistake that you think the current government of Sudan is not involved with terrorism. This is the government, the military wing of al-Bashir is still ruling the Sudan right now, and that needs to be understood and dealt with. So the United States, instead of rewarding the regime that has killed millions of people in Sudan, that is terrorism in itself. If you don't call it, if you are selective about calling what amount to terrorism and what not, no, killing 10 people, it's designated as terrorism. Killing million people is equally terrorism in Darfur, but those are killed within the Sudan, but killed by the same government and by the same regime. And Sudan needs to be held accountable. Sudan must be held accountable, and the interim government of Sudan must do its own due diligence. Our demand is that holding those who are responsible of more serious crimes in Darfur accountable by surrendering al-Bashir and the Ahmed Harun and Hussein to the ICC as the start. To end this violence, we have to take those steps. Demanding and calling upon the United States, and I urge you from this platform to the Sudanese and Darfuri in particular, and those who are from Nuba Mountain, Eastern Sudan, those who continue to suffer for years from this crisis while other Sudanese are watching. Right now, there is a few group of Sudanese, they are allying themselves with the interim government, and they are calling on the US to release Sudan. You must reach out to your members of Congress and to our friends, the Sudanese, the friends of Sudan and Darfur. We urge you to call on your representative in the House of Representatives, including Congress and the Senate, and demand that the United States must not go ahead and delist Sudan, must not lift Sudan's name from the terrorist-sponsored country, because terrorism has not ended in Sudan. And not only that, but those who have committed terrorism crime and genocide crime in Sudan have not been held accountable. Not only they have not been held accountable, but they have been sheltered and protected by the current interim government, because those military wings are close allies with al-Bashir, and they are most likely responsible of all the crimes that were committed by al-Bashir, whether they are terrorism crimes or genocide crimes or crimes against humanity and war crimes that is committed against the people of Sudan in Darfur, in Nuba Mountain, and in other regions. And that is why it is very important that we call on the US government to not delist Sudan. In the beginning of the negotiation, the United States said we cannot support a military government, but right now that seems it's going to change, and this administration is trying to change that. But we have to call on them. They must not lift the Sudan's name from terrorist-sponsored country until the government become fully under civilians. Without having civilians government in place, if we get that, this military group have accumulated a huge amount of money from killing people, from having money laundering and all kind of crimes and using black market to sell, and they accumulated that money. If tomorrow the delisting of Sudan took place, then they will be allowed to conduct transaction, and they will leverage that in recruiting again other terrorist group, and it will be also jeopardizing the national security of the United States. But on above all, it is jeopardizing the life and the safety and security of the Sudanese people. And we, the Sudanese American, must not let that happen. And we must speak up and urge the Trump administration, Secretary of the State Empire. We must go out and criticize him, tell them that it is not the time to delist Sudan or lift sanction completely from Sudan. We have to see the financial accountability and criminal accountability taken place. And we have to see this violence stop. Without ending this violence, Sudan cannot move forward. You cannot agree with Sudan to move forward with only Khartoum only. Sudan is not only Khartoum. Sudan is a huge country with 6 historical regions. The south is separated and become independent, but there are 5 other regions, and the greater Darfur is the largest region with the largest population right now. If Darfur is not stable, Sudan will not be stable. The people of Darfur are farmers, and 80 to 90% of them are practicing farming and also raising livestock. And they used to contribute to over 60% of the national income or national GDP of Sudan before the crisis in Darfur. And today the people, Sudan is in economic crisis is because the people of Darfur are held hostage in camps. The people of Nuba Mountain are held hostage in camps and they cannot produce. And the people of Blue Nile, if these 3 regions are free and in safety and stability, they will go back and they will contribute to the food security in their own country. There's also another big topic that right now all the international agencies and the UN is concerned about, that 10 million people in Sudan are at risk of food insecurity. And this is the rainy season, whereby we see that right now flooding and rain has destroyed so many places, including my own hometown in Kapkabia, and also there is another areas in Bahari. People are right now, thousands of people out of their homes. In Kapkabia, 7,000 homes are completely destroyed. So this is a very critical time in which this violence has to stop. People continue to face violence, including during the pandemic. And the Secretary General of the United Nations recently said that he sees wars has being seized and decreased during the COVID-19. Unfortunately, this is not the case. And it's very sad that in Sudan, even during this COVID-19, and what this means to the people of Sudan, we talk about social distancing, we talk about isolation, we talk about quarantining. That's not an option in Darfur right now today. It's not an option because people, when they are attacked, they are forced out of their home. When their homes are burned, they have no place to shelter. They are forced to shelter in a small place where they are crowded and they have no access to clean water. They have no access to food. So they have no leverage or luxury of social distancing or quarantining, even when they have COVID-19. And that is the situation that right now we are facing. And there is an expectation of a health crisis that will follow this, because all these areas where people have been under attack, in Nertete, in Al Junaina, in Kapkabi, all these areas are inaccessible during the rainy season. And when they are inaccessible, people are starving in the first place. People are mostly people have been forced to flee their homes, and people are now facing another crisis, which is a natural crisis, which is flooding, whereby thousands of people have been driven out of their homes and their homes are completely wiped. And now malaria and waterborne diseases and so many other will be, and then while people are lacking the minimal means of survival. So this is why it is important that the interim government step up responsibility to end this violence so that people can live in peace. Those who negotiate peace in Juba, they are joking. Why not they stop? There will not be peace if there is no ceasefire. And these are government-affiliated army who are attacking people. They have to have a voice. Those opposition who are negotiating and agreeing with the government, Otherwise, they are seeking position, and seeking position does not bring solution to Darfur. Peace has to be on the ground, practice on the ground, and peace, ending violence and ending attack against civilians, it has to be a prerequisite to any peace negotiation or any peace agreement. Otherwise, it will be the same as a previous agreement that were signed and failed to bring any kind of like meaningful peace on the ground. And that is need to be understood. And therefore, we urge and call upon the international community, the member state of the UN Security Council, also the United States, the European countries who have been gathering and rallying other countries to support the Sudan. They must understand. There's also an important issue that we all need to shed a light on and speak about it, is that now many European countries are trying to deport asylum seekers from Europe back to Sudan, justifying that Sudan is now in peace, there is change, there is democracy, that the people of Sudan. That is wrong. The level of violence that we have seen in Darfur, for those who went out and claimed asylum, if they come back in Sudan, they will face a risk of being killed or arrested and tortured. And we must tell this government that they need to understand that peace in Sudan is not an overnight process, and it's not going to happen as long as people are under attack, not today, not tomorrow. This all interim period is not going to see peace because the interim government is not willing to bring peace. The interim government is not willing to end violence, and that's why we must always speak up. Those who are focusing on Sudan, working on Sudan, they must speak up and must exercise pressure over the interim government to end this violence against the people of Darfur. The people is not in war, but in a situation that it's like really, really dangerous. And now this recent attack and this recent violence, including the sit-in that was organized in Kassala, these people have their clear demand. And that shows you that this interim government is not inclusive. It's not inclusive in a way of selecting people from different regions, but it's not inclusive in its approach to resolving the crisis in Sudan. It is approach to incorporate the issues of Sudanese people from various regions. They look at, including Prime Minister Hamdok, they look at the issues in Sudan from the lens of Khartoum, and that is wrong. And that is why Sudan continues to be in crisis. And today, as people have been talking that al-Bashir separated South Sudan, and now Prime Minister Hamdok, if he's not careful, he will separate Darfur and Eastern Sudan. And this is a conversation that is taking place among the people of Eastern Sudan and among the people of Darfur, because if you are staying as part of a country whereby your people have no right to basic safety, protection, and basic needs, and there is no recognition, they have no access to decision making, why would people stay? And that is what people are discussing right now in various forums. And that is why it is really dangerous to think that the interim government of Sudan is changing the situation or providing safety and security for people. Simply, they have to issue a decision and call on their people, reintegrate these militias and withdraw them from the civilian inhabitant areas and stop them from attacking people, and stepping up, creating community policing from this community who have been for years subjected to this kind of attack and crisis. Otherwise, the Sudan will not be in peace, and Sudan will not be transformed, no matter how many peace agreement is signed. It's not about the paper that people sign, it is a political will, and the will of including all people of Sudan as part of the solution and bringing a solution to the entire people of Sudan, and putting a system and taking an approach that will resolve the crisis and the problem of Sudan comprehensively and sustainably. Otherwise, it will be a group of people who created position and jobs for themselves, and then they will bring those opposition who have been negotiating in Juba and give them positions, and will continue to run the country exactly the way al-Bashir have been running it. And that is why this is wrong. The international community have for years invested in Sudan. And now I think the United States and these other members of the international community, including the United Nations, must not invest in Sudan that is not going to move forward. Yes, the Sudanese people have been suffering, and we want a sustainable solution, not a quick fix solution whereby giving position to some group and having the military in place, but using Prime Minister Hamadou as kind of the face rebranding to go around and speak as if this is a democratic country. Sudan is not a democratic country right now, and it is wrong for the officials like Secretary of the State Pompeo to say Sudan is now democratic country and moving. There is no election whatsoever. What are you saying? You're telling me that it's democratic? It's not democratic. Sudan is not democratic. And having this harmful individual integrated into the interim government, but they are led by the military. They are led by the military. And guess what? The recent change in government, there was a huge mistake that has been made. There was the only qualified individual who have been driven out of his position and was forced to resign, who was the Sudan former finance minister. This is the most qualified, credible person who have worked for years for the World Bank. He has been providing consulting and advice to many governments around the globe. Today, Sudan needed him the most, and they driven him out. Why? He set a budget that will not be approved by the military at all. He cut military spending and increased spending in health, education, agriculture, and created projects were sensitive to respond to crisis affected areas. And because of that, the interim government did not approve, and the military wing of the interim government refused to approve. And then they created this committee to oversee the finance minister. Can you believe that? You create a committee that chaired by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, a guy who is illiterate, came from the forest, and he is the most corrupt, because the only reason Himeti rose to power because of how many people he killed, the number of people he killed, the number of people displaced, and the number of people have been brutalized and raped by his forces. And that's why he was rewarded and given this position. You create a committee and putting it on top of the finance minister, the man who has a PhD, but also has over 30 years of experience working on this, on finance and various positions. And that is showing you that the interim government is getting corrupt, and they do not want dedicated people who may bring change to Sudan, because the military wing did not approve the budget that was set by the finance minister. And this shows you that Sudan is now not stable, it is still corrupt, and it still needs accountability, and still need to be pressured by the international community, and pressured by the United States, and they should not be given a free pass. And that is doing not realistic Sudan, forcing Sudan to meet certain measures by ending violence, holding those commit crimes against the people of Sudan accountable, holding those who commit crimes of terrorism accountable before you can delist Sudan and lift sanctions completely. Today, the interim government has to work to revive the economy without getting the international community giving them the fee. They have to show commitment, that they are committed to accountability, that they are committed to improving the situation, that they are including all Sudanese who are historically marginalized, without inclusion of the historically marginalized Sudanese. And this is that 90% of the Sudanese people. If you think Sudan can move forward without 90% of the Sudanese people, you will be kidding me. And Sudan will fail, the interim government will fail, and the international community will repeatedly help Sudan to fail instead of helping Sudan to succeed. In order for Sudan to succeed, the international community, including the United States, must demand thorough accountability, and also demand that violence must end, the militarization and militias must be stopped, but also land that has been confiscated and taken away from the people of Darfur has to be returned to the rightful owner by under the international standards. And to tell you the truth, in Darfur, land ownership, every single tribe lives in Darfur has its own hakura. They have their own land, and the land use is not restricted. So there is no need for nobody to come and force people out of their land and take over, because there is a huge amount of land. You can still peacefully use it without hijacking somebody's land. And that is the problem right now that is going on. People are killed because of their land, and that's the genocide. Forcing people out, and genocide must be stopped, and accountability for the crimes of genocide. To end this violence, accountability is a must. Without accountability, Darfur will not be in peace. And if Darfur is not in peace, Sudan will not be in peace. If the Nuba Mountains and the Blue Nile is not in peace, Sudan will not be in peace. If Eastern Sudan is not in peace, Sudan will not be in peace. And if Sudan is not in peace, Sudan will never, ever be transformed to a democratic country. And that is what we want to make it clear right now, that the interim government of Sudan need to take more responsibility to resolve the crisis in Sudan in order for them to move forward, and also to get the support from the international community. And they will not do so unless we tell them they have to speak up. And we have to speak up to compel them to act. And we have to speak up also to hold our own leaders here in the United States. And also for those of you who are in Europe and in other countries, you have to hold your government accountable and making it clear that they have to exercise pressure over the government of Sudan and force them to promote accountability and improvement of human rights and protection of human rights of its people, and protection of women's rights, protection of the right of internally displaced and refugees, and protection of the people's right to own their land or to restore their stolen land before Sudan can be supported. Otherwise, Sudan will not be stable. Sudan will not be in peace. Thank you. I will stop our English presentation here, and I look forward to see if you have any questions for me. I'll be more than happy to answer. And if there is not questions, also feel free to send your questions. If we don't, if you are not in position to send your question right now, you can also leave a question for us, and then we will be more than happy to answer your questions in the coming days and get back in touch with you. I will give a few minutes for questions to be answered, and then we can move forward into the Arabic presentation of our Arabic part of our presentation.